Hi, welcome to another video. It's Cara here and today with me my October wrap up. So my goal for October was to read only vibe books, by which I mean fall, spooky, atmospheric, you feel. I was a bit slumpy throughout the month, and by a bit I mean quite a bit. So I didn't read as much physical books as I normally do, but I did, and I prioritized shorter reads to get through them, but I did get to 31 and 31, which has been my goal, like every month, to read a book a day, and I did manage that. So here it is, let's get going. I had five-star reads, one of which I'm a bit iffy on. I'll explain that first up. I had no DNFs and I had no 2-star or 1-star. It was, most things were 4, handful of 3s, couple of 5s. Well, 3s and 5s, but yeah. So it was overall a good month. I've enjoyed what I read. I just didn't read a lot of long stuff, like page-wise. I was way lower than normal. So first up in the month, I read A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. This is the one I have no idea how to rate. Because on one hand, I've given it a 5 stars on Goodreads because that's what I gave it the moment I finished it. I personally really enjoyed my reading experience. I understand it's not for everyone in its readability. It was specifically talking about plot, characterization, and character development and world building. In that aspect, it's not for everyone. It's got a very sassy narration, which I know people either love or hate. It's kind of info-dumpy in that, but I don't mind an info-dump in a sassy narration. In fact, I kind of love it. The plot really only happens in the last little bit, and this is only like barely 300 pages, if that. It's like 298 or something. Oh, 313, and the plot really happens maybe in the last 50 pages. The rest of it is a lot of world building and character development, and even then, yeah, it's info dumpy, but in a way that I personally really enjoyed, and like very specific. Before all the stuff that, as a white person, I talked about this in my blog for ages, there were controversial, which I hate saying controversy because it's not controversy, it just is. But there were components to this that I was not aware of. Coming from a white background, I didn't have the information to pick up on some things. There were a couple of things that I was a bit about, that I was like, yikes, but it was a momentary moment. I was just like, but overall didn't affect my reading experience. But there's some things that I've become aware of since that I'm like, big yikes. But at the time of reading, I was like, this is my perfect book. Not for everyone, but the writing style, plot, characterization, pacing, my perfect book. But things that are obvious that I didn't even think about because I was just enjoying my reading experience so much. I feel like I don't want to say what this is about because like everyone's said what this is about, but it's a adult, I would argue new adult fantasy. What was I saying? Poor, distracted by the dog. This basically, yeah, it's written and perfect for me, but there are things that were just not handled well. The main character is biracial, white Indian, and that was definitely done in like a cop-out representation way because I don't think she's treated like, the character doesn't come across as biracial in any way, shape or form. It's very surface level. And conveniently, her Indian father has died. She doesn't have any engagement with her Indian family, so she isn't culturally Indian in any way. It's very surface level, yeah, surface level representation. Also, something I was definitely not aware of, apparently and I will trust the people who have been tweeting about this, the magic system in this is called Mana and Malia, and one is about using energy you've created and one's about using energy from life force. I can't remember which one's one. I think Mana is the good one, but apparently this is a cultural term taken from Polynesian culture, and it's not used appropriately, and it was very much appropriated, if you know what I mean, rather than appreciated. and that's another factor that is like poorly managed. I don't know. I don't want to recommend this to anyone. I don't want to promote it, but personally I might still continue with the series in my own reading without promoting it as they come out. But yeah, so if those things weren't present and the microaggressions related to those weren't present, this would have been perfect and 5 stars for me, but I would still be very cautious as to who I recommended it to, because I would be aware that like it's not perfect for everyone. But even then, I'm gonna stop talking about it now. Then I read The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. This is it's an Indigenous American horror, and is, I think, set in Blackfeet area, because I know that's Stephen Graham Jones' Blackfoot. And it's about a group of guys who shoot and kill an elk or a deer, and they kind of don't follow the cultural practices properly because they're out of time, bit lazy, kind of like understand, like know about their culture obviously, but kind of take it with a grain of salt, and then it comes back and bites them on the ass, the fact that they didn't follow their cultural practices appropriately. And this elk then, or the spirit of the elk then proceeds to hunt and kill all of them in very creative ways. It's very fascinating, very dark, very psychological. It was amazing. I gave it 4 stars. I think that might have been because I listened to the audiobooks. There were a few times where things kind of went over my head a little, and it had an odd pacing because it kind of went after each of the guys, so it kind of like would have a build and then it would dull as we then built up to the next build, kind of thing, which I think didn't work perfect for me, but it was so eerie and so interesting. It's like a high 4 stars. Next up, I read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. You've probably also heard all about this. This is a historical fantasy following Addie, who makes a deal with the devil, or a devilish kind of creature, to live freely, which I think it gets misinterpreted into like living forever, but nobody can remember her. And I didn't love this. I was a bit disappointed. I was expecting to like be an instant 5 stars, and it wasn't. It was probably what put me in a reading slump, to be honest. I did like it. I thought it was interesting, though I've read some reviews that I'm like, oh, you know what, you're right. This somehow fully whitewashes history. So we're following 300 years of Addie engaging with the world, and like she just doesn't engage with people of color at all. In moving to America, and like in places where there should have been people of color, and kind of just misses it. But also it's very slow. The plot took ages to develop, and for me, I didn't feel a personal connection with Addie. I felt a good connection to now I can't even remember his name, Henry, who's the love interest. And I was much more invested in his story, but his story is less prominent, and so I found following Addie a little bit trudgy at times. I gave it 4 stars. It's probably a 3.5 rounding up to a 4, but it was fine. I didn't love it as much as other people have been loving it, which is unfortunate, but oh. Then I read Wait for Night. Can I even remember what this is about? Oh yes, this is another Stephen Graham Jones. I read a fuck ton of things by Stephen Graham Jones this month. This was a short story, kind of following they dig up a tree. They're like fixing this, what's it called, a dam or something, and they dig up this tree and find bones in it, and it's a thing. It's kind of a vampire-y story. It's very short. I gave it 4 stars. I would recommend it. It was very interesting, especially if you're looking for a short horror. Then I read Rules for Vanishing by Kate Alice Marshall. I freaking really enjoyed this. It's very creepy, very eerie. It reminded me of something, but now I can't remember what it was it reminded me of. It's a horror told in mixed media format, and we follow Sarah, who her sister went missing looking for this road, and it's like magical road kind of thing. And so she is now going to try and figure out where, like, find her sister on this road. The road is full of horrors. It's super creepy. It has, it's told in mixed media, which I really enjoyed. And it was so creepy and so atmospheric and so unsettling. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. Then I read Prosperos Demon by KJ Parker. This is a novella. We're following a guy who is like the antithesis of these demon things. He's kind of like from a holy order, and you don't know his name the whole time, and he's trying to like exorcise these demons which kind of manipulate and control people. It was interesting. It had cool narrative devices, but I just didn't love it. So I gave it 3 stars. I also read Hex Life, which is a anthology of witchy stories. I didn't love this one either. Some of the stories were good. I can't remember which ones now, but some of them were good. Some of them really didn't stick with me. My other main problem was I listened to the audiobook of this, and they're all narrated by the same person. So I often would lose track of when one story had ended and another had begun, which made it very difficult to enjoy. I gave it 3 stars because plenty of the stories were good, so it kind of like averaged out. But yeah, my overall thoughts were not great, but all right. Then I obviously read another Stephen Graham Jones, this is Night of the Mannequin, and is a kind of like a slasher horror. Our main character and his friends have this prank they want to pull, where they have this mannequin that's lived in their, like, one of their yards that they found, and they set it up in the cinema, and then to pretend to be a person to get in for like free tickets or something. It's like a prank, but then the main character sees the mannequin get up and walk out, and then all these things start going wrong, and it's a slasher, but not in the way you would expect. I kind of don't want to spoil it. It was really fun and entertaining. I gave it 5 stars. It was really good. Then I read The Yellow Wallpaper. This is a really short psychological thriller horror about a woman with depression, basically, and she's kept inside because it's the kind of time where that's not a thing you did. You didn't have depression, so and women didn't have many rights. So her husband kind of puts her in the house out in the countryside, and she starts entering some kind of psychosis. Really interesting, but it was really short. Though it was absolutely fascinating and interesting. The writing style wasn't my favorite. I did really enjoy it though. I gave it 3 stars. Then I read one of my favorite books of the month, Elazaway by Darcy Littlebadger. This is another Indigenous American story. Darcy Littlebadger is Lipa Apache, and Elazaway is about a girl who can interact with ghosts. She has a dog that's a ghost, and then her cousin dies really violently, and she's kind of like visited by his ghost to like figure out what's going on, because everyone thinks he just died in a car accident. It explores race, like racial and like cultural tensions to an intense degree. I really enjoyed it. It's got a lot of friendship. It's kind of like an alternate America where things are pretty similar, except there's knowledge of like vampires and things like that. Like her best friend's sister's boyfriend is a vampire, and everyone knows that. Like, and there's like animal people. Everyone knows these things exist. So it's much more out in the open. Things I really loved about this was the friendship dynamic, the fact that the parents always wholeheartedly believed her. It wasn't like kids trying to solve the mystery and all the adults were against them. The adults were like fully there supporting, and it was great. There was just like limitations on what they were capable of doing that made everything harder. Another thing I really liked was, I think this actually reads age appropriate. She's 17, and it reads maybe a little juvenile to me, a fully grown adult, but in a way that's very appropriate for the age range, I think. And she's just wholesome. She's asexual or demisexual, I think. Maybe even aromantic as well. She's not really interested in romance or sex. And so there's like no romance in this. It's just fan family, friendship, family, trying to do your best, but a lot of cultural stuff as well around death, ghosts, how that all manifests. And I loved this. I gave it 5 blazing stars. It was so good. Then I read The Near Witch and The Ashborne Boy, which is the short story in this as well, by V.E. Schwab. I didn't love this. It was alright. It definitely makes sense as V.E. Schwab's debut work, so I was kind of critiquing it like knowing that, so I didn't want to like give it too harsh a critique. I gave The Near Witch 3 stars and The Ashborne Boy also 3 stars. I did enjoy them. These are about a small town that has a weird relationship with witches. They previously like drove out some witches, and now their kids are going missing, and our main character is trying to solve it. To me, it had a few anachronisms that didn't kind of work. Like, her name's Lexi, which seems to me very modern, but then the village had very old-fashioned vibes. It was hard to tell whether it was meant to be contemporary or fantasy. The world building was a bit lackluster. But this was also written in 2012. I think if this came out, it's like 2012 writing, where the expectations of what a 2012 book read like were a lot simpler. Especially in YA, we weren't expecting as much from a YA read, with the vibes of a modern read. Like, this witchy, mysterious stuff seems very modern, but the writing is very of its time, if that makes sense. So I give it 3 stars. I give both of these in there 3 stars. I also read Catherine House by Elizabeth Thomas. This is a very weird, dark academia-y, paranormally story about a boarding school that's kind of like a post-high school, like a college kind of school, where you go and you're not allowed to leave, you're not allowed to talk to anyone about the school, it's all insular, you never send letters home, you never receive letters, but after 3 years, when you graduate, you can get any job you want. It's very mysterious. And it was super interesting. I listened to the audiobook for this. I was fascinated throughout. Maybe the ending was a little bit of a letdown. It didn't really grab my attention as much as I wanted. I gave it 4 stars overall, because that build up an atmosphere throughout most of it was really good and really interesting. It's very bizarre. And yeah, I enjoyed it. I also read Hex by Rebecca Denniston Knight. This is a I don't even know how to describe this. Essentially, our main character is a little bit off the rails. She was part of a lab that was trying to develop faster detoxifiers for poisons, and one of her lab mates died. And it's very much a like mental Olympics, but this is true dark academia and like exploring the ways academia is fucked up, and she's fucked up, and there's interplays between some of her friends, her ex, the professors, the people who like, it's all super complicated. It's very much a character study of this like little interplay between these characters. It's fucked up, it's weird. The main character is so weird, and she's dealing with a lot of like, I would almost say like imposter syndrome trauma. Like, she doesn't understand her place or how to fit in or how to engage in the space she's been put in, and all she wants is to be like accepted and adored by her supervisor, and things get weird. It's weird. I gave this 4 stars. Next up, I read Follow Me to Ground by Sue Rainsford. This is a novella again, and it's kind of about a group of people who can heal people, but they do it by like going into bodies. It was super interesting. I gave it 4 stars. I'm kind of trying to go faster because I'm running out of charge. I also read Blackbird Volume 1. by Sam Humphries and Jen Bartel. This is a graphic novel. I really enjoyed this. This was super cool and super interesting. It's like aliens fantasy. It was weird but super cool, and I definitely want to continue it. I give this 4 stars. Then I read The Scapegraces by Hannah Abigail Clark. I freaking adored this. This is a contemporary witchy fantasy about this like group of girls that kind of become their own coven, but things are fucked up. It's very dark, it's very grungy, and it was just so cool. I can't wait to read the sequel. I gave this 5 stars. Then I read The Girl in the Well by Rincha Paco. I gave this 3 stars. This is I think Rincha Paco's debut work, and it's kind of a ghosty story resembling like The Ring. I think it's meant to be inspired by the same thing that inspired The Ring. It was really cool. I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it, and the audiobook was kind of probably a hindrance to that, and I gave it 3 stars. I also listened to The Yellow Jessamine by Caitlin Starling. This is another short kind of horror that's about a woman in a like medieval kind of era. She's kind of like a Snow White character. It's kind of like a Snow White retelling, but there's a lot about poisons. It was interesting, didn't love it, 3 stars. Then I read Now Entering Adamsville by Francesca Zappia. This is a dark contemporary fantasy paranormal ghost story involving these like violent creatures who set things aflame, and our main character can see them and fight them, as well as the ghosts, but she doesn't really. Her mum who was teaching her disappeared, and she's kind of like trying to figure out her role, and she's kind of off the rails. Everyone thinks she's off the rails, so they don't really trust her. She keeps getting arrested and stuff like that. It's really interesting. I didn't love it, but I kind of think this should have a sequel. It kind of left off like it was gonna have a sequel, but everything on Goodreads says it doesn't. But I gave it 3 stars. Then we have The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. I really enjoyed this. This is about cults in a kind of, I'd say almost post-apocalyptic. It's a very insulated area, and we follow a biracial main character who is dealing with the results of her biracialness. She's like the only one in the cult proper, and the blackness, her blackness is conflated with her witchiness. Her mother was a witch, and suddenly these plagues are happening that she could be responsible for, or kind of. It was fascinating. It's super dark, and I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. I also listened to The Mystery of Black Hollow Lane, which is a middle grade mystery boarding school secret society murder mystery. It was really fun. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. I also read The Lives of Saints by Leigh Bardugo and gave this 4 stars. This is just like a series of okay, I just had to charge my camera. The cats, oh, the cats have kind of positioned themselves right around me, so I don't have that much space. I'm sitting in a bit slightly different position. Yeah, so just ignore me. I'm a little bit closer to you. I'm like sitting off the edge of my bed instead of on my bed, but like Susie's right behind me. Trixie's over here. Just wasn't gonna work. So before my camera died, I was talking about Lives of Saints. So this is by Leigh Bardugo. It's a little collection of vignettes about different saints. If you've read King of Scars, I think this is really, I don't want to say beneficial because I don't think it's necessary at all, but it gives you some insight, I would say. If you haven't read King of Scars, it probably means not much. I give it 4 stars. It was fun. It was really fast. I think it's beautifully designed. I'm going to take this off now because I'm not going to put it on my shelf with that on. I'm going to like hide that somewhere because like it's stunning. And I do think it adds a little for the Nikolai duology. So then I read Missing Presumed Dead by Emma Berquist. This is a paranormal ghosty kind of story. Our main character can see ghosts, see how people are going to die, and kind of push ghosts through to the other side. But in the society, people have a lot of different kinds of powers, but it's all kind of kept underground. And then there's murders happening that they're trying to solve, and she's kind of interacting with one of the ghosts. I really enjoyed this. It was better than I was expecting, but it was also not at all what I was expecting. I did really enjoy it. It is a lot more character driven. This month I don't know whether it's because of the themes I was focusing on, but I seem to read a lot about girls stuck in bad situations, like now entering Adamsville, the Near Witch, where women were, like Hex even, the Year of the Witching. It was a lot about women being put in situations that weren't great but was out of their control, and this is the case here too. Our main character is like basically living in poverty. She can't touch anyone because she can sense when they're going to die, and it overwhelms her. So she's spending a lot of time like sleeping at a mental hospital just to not have to touch anyone. It was very dark, traumatic, sorry. But yeah, I enjoyed it overall. I give this one 4 stars as well. Then I listened to The Last Final Girl by Stephen Graham Jones. This is another Stephen Graham Jones, and this one is a full slasher that's like commenting on slashers. It like critiques and parodies slashers. The main characters are a bunch of girls. There was a final girl who was being chased by this guy in a Michael Jackson mask, and she like killed him, but as with most slashers, the villains never stay dead. And then she is collecting a bunch of final girls or people who survived horror films. Like, it's like the town knows they're in a horror film, and so she's collecting some other final girls to surround herself with to survive the next sequel. And our main character is one of those girls that kind of gets tied into things. It's a great parody on slashers. It's written in a kind of scripty format. I don't know what it looks like physically, but in the audiobook it reads kind of like a script. It was super fun, super entertaining. I totally recommend it. It was so good. I gave it 5 stars. Then I also listened to I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. I enjoyed this. I didn't know what to expect. It was very weird. The ending, very weird. Again, this is like a psychological thriller. My main problem was that the ending kind of negated a lot of things. I'd be interested to go and read back, but it was like a lot of the things that built psychological suspense kind of they didn't get solved. They got pushed aside because of the ending, if that makes sense. But I'd like to figure out if I can figure out how to piece those all together, but I don't know if I can ever be bothered. I think it needs some deep critical analysis. But yeah, on the surface level, the ending kind of wiped clean all the suspense, which was kind of frustrating. But I did enjoy my time reading it. I gave it 4 stars. I did listen to that one as well. Then I read Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This is Been Eaten Up by Trixie. Yes, by Trixie, the cat. I joked on Twitter, like, oh, you get a puppy, protect your books. No, protect your books from the cat you've had for years who suddenly decides because you didn't feed her in the morning, she's gonna eat your book. It wasn't even breakfast time. It was like 6 AM and she went into this. So thanks, buddy. Thanks so much for that. This is a very weird... It kind of reminds me of things like S by Doug Dorst, House of Leaves. Kind of has those vibes. It also is vaguely like... It's like the magic is not fully explained. It's very open-ended. But it's fascinating to read from. We follow this guy. He gets called Piranesi, but he doesn't think that's his name. And he's in this labyrinth. And he kind of understands and knows the labyrinth and how to move around in it. But things are coming to light. And his memory might not be as reliable as he thought. And it's super interesting, but I just wish I understood more by the end. I gave this 4 stars, I think. Yeah, 4. Oh, he's right behind me. Then I read a couple of more like teeny tiny short pieces, short horror. First one is A Forest or a Tree, and this is about a bunch of kids who end up lost in the woods because things aren't quite going right, and they're like trespassing on the, I assume, a native a folklore kind of thing of like land they shouldn't be in, and things just start to go wrong. It was bizarre but spooky and fun. I gave it 4 stars. The other one that I read was Mama Bruise. I should have written down the author's names, but I didn't. Mama Bruise is about a woman and her husband who she thinks her dad's been reincarnated as a dog, but he's kind of got Alzheimer's. Like the dog has consciousness but also is very erratic, and she thinks it's because of the way the bond went, like the way he reincarnated. She believes in reincarnation, but that you shouldn't remember your past life, but somehow her dad remembers, and it's freaking weird, but it was also really entertaining. I really enjoyed it. So that's Mama Bruise. And finally for the month, I read Unnatural Magic by C.M. Wagner. This, I was not sure what I was going to think of it. Even reading it, I wasn't sure what I was going to think of it. Most of the way through, she also had a little nibble on this, but she didn't like get so bad. This is super weird. It's historical fantasy where there are trolls, and they are like the superior being, and there's trolls that are being killed presumably by humans, and so there's kind of like a race war kind of happening. We follow 3 characters predominantly, and through 2 character trajectories that barely meet up till right at the end, which I think is one of the things that I struggled with for a large portion of this, that the 2 were so disparate. I felt like I was reading 2 separate books for a large portion. So we follow Honor, who is a human girl who's really good at magic, and magic is kind of scientific. It's about like writing protocols and parameters for spells. It's very scientific, and she's amazing at it, but she's a girl, so, and from a like backwater village, so none of the fancy universities want to take her on. So she travels across the sea to somewhere that says they will, like, that seems to be willing to take on weirder people, and she ends up as an apprentice to like the head wizard in this area. And then we follow a troll woman, but trolls don't have genders and gender roles the same way that humans do. So she's a dominant troll, which they call Reegs, who then take on Varns as part of their clan, which are like subordinate trolls. So she's a Reeg. And we also follow what is the man's name? Jeffrin, who's a human man who gets caught up with the troll girl Syrah, and they have a romancy thing going on, but it's a very, I don't want to say BDSM because it's not BDSM, but it has those levels of like, it's a romance, but not in a human romancy way. It's very much about the, like, in the troll sense in this world. So she like has strong attachment to him, wants him to be her like Varn, and she's like a runt troll. She's I think she's half troll, half human, and so the trolls don't really respect her, but her mother's a big leader in the trolls, so she's trying to like gain her position and stuff. It's super weird. I don't even know how to explain it, but it was fascinating by the end, and how it all came together was really interesting, and I really enjoyed it. And I really want to read the second book that's coming out soon, that's a companion to this, which is called A Lady's Guide to Wizardry or something like that, which is a sapphic story set in this world. And yeah, it was weird. It was so weird, but I give it 4 stars. So those are all the books that I read in the month of October. It was a weird bunch. I don't know what to think about some things. But yeah, if you've read any of these and you want to chat about them with me, feel free to comment down below. Otherwise, I'll see you soon with another video. And thanks so much for watching. Bye.